Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to summer camp. I can't tell you how excited I am to have those of you that are here today with me to kick this off. We got a small and mighty group of about 50 people so far. So welcome to the first week of the higher ed summer camp, back to the basics. Couple things as we get going. Um, Heartfelt welcome to all of you. My name is Rachel Cruzel. I'm the Territory Sales Director for Text Help. I support higher ed in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri, and also K-12 in the state of Minnesota. I have a lot of involvement with AHEAD, so you might have heard or seen of me before from there. I've got my sunscreen, my whistle ready to go for these next 7 weeks together. And I'm just excited that you're here. Couple things before we get going. You're all on mute. If you have questions, feel free to put them into the question box. Likewise, if there's anything kind of chat related, feel free to pop anything in there. I'll be monitoring them kind of when we get to the end of sections, just to make sure we're all kind of on the same page. If for some reason you can't join us today or any of the other weeks ahead of us, I'm going to send out a recording of the webinar. Watch for that. My goal would be sort of within 24 hours, so that if you can't join us, you have almost a week to kind of jump back in, get on the same page as everyone for the next week's series of recordings. I'll also send out the slide deck with the recording, as well as any resources we talk about if they're not included in the PowerPoint in and of itself, or I should say the slide deck. I did send out a copy of the slide deck yesterday about 1:45 Central Time. If you didn't get a copy of it for some reason, watch for a copy of it to come with the recording as well. Again, I'll try to do that where I send a copy of it ahead of time, also a copy with the recorded webinar as well. So what are we going to talk about today? I've got a huge agenda on here. I promise we'll get through all of it, but we're going to talk kind of about what is Read&Write, what the functionality of it is, where it works, what applications it works within and with, how do we install the tool, settings and options, updates, feedback, resources that are available to me, data desk, and then practical strategies and next steps with the tool. What I've got on screen here is a group of our little text helper guys, or our little icon kind of mascots, and they're in an airplane flying 30,000 feet above the ground. And that's kind of what we're going to do today. We're going to give you kind of this broad level overview of the tool, some of these things that I feel like are kind of the guts of what you need if you're a customer of ours, if you're looking to come on board to make sure you're successful with the tool. It's kind of laying that foundation for us so that we can continue to move on through our 7 weeks together and talk about more complex things, more how do we use this with students, etc. I've got a picture of a text helper on screen now with a couple piles of paper in front of him, and he's kind of sweating a little bit. It might feel a little bit like syllabus day today. I hope that maybe there's a couple chuckles from you that are attending. I'm going to try to make this as engaging and fun as I can. Of all of our weeks, it might be the least fun. So know that more fun and games will come. It is a little bit like the first day of summer camp. I was a camp counselor for many years, so I remember how day one isn't always the funnest, but I'll see what I can do to kind of make it more exciting. So without further ado, I'm going to double check the question box. It looks like there's nothing in the chat, nothing in the questions. So why don't we kick this off and talk about what is Read&Write, okay? So what is Read&Write? If you don't know what it is, it's Text Help's literacy support software, which is a toolbar-based program. It's 20 tools in one. We kind of lovingly joke that it's our Swiss Army knife of tools. We have over 25 million users worldwide, both K through 12, higher education, and then we do also have a large number of people who use it in workplace as well, so kind of day-to-day work. So you might have students who have used it in K-12, might use it with you, and then when they go to their job, it might actually be a pretty good fit for them when they hit the workplace. And then we cover a bunch of different platforms of where the tool works and how, and we're going to break that down today to make sure we're all on the same page. One of the best things about our tool, and I say this as a customer, as a past customer, I should say, and then also someone who works here now, is that our tool is continually developed and updated over time. I spent 10 years working in higher education, doing the job as many of you are doing now who are joining us today. I was an AT specialist. I worked with college students with this tool, implementing it on campus, both in our office and also across campus with all students, converting textbook, testing, you name it. I kind of was that jack of all trades person with the office. I always noticed that this tool was constantly developed and constantly updated. And so I feel like it's important for us to gather right now to make sure we kind of all know about the developments and the updates that are going on. And we're going to talk more about what that looks like for our company as we go on today. So what I've got on the screen here is a picture of our Read and Write toolbar. It floats at the top of your screen. Depending upon the version of the tool that you're using, there might be some ability to move it around your screen. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But the big thing to know is that we have versions of our toolbar that work in a variety of different places that students work within on a day-to-day basis within the educational realm. Right now on the screen, you're seeing the Google version of it, but know that it works in a bunch of different places. This kind of just gives you, again, that 30,000 foot overview that this is what the toolbar looks like. A toolbar with a lot of different tools across the top. We're going to break what each of these tools is and how it works and how you apply it with students in our next 2 weeks, weeks 2 and 3. Today, again, more holistically of what the toolbar does, where it works, etc. So let's talk about that functionality. Where does it work? How does it work? What does it do? Read and Write is a toolbar that helps students with that literacy support. Things like reading, things like writing, study skills, research, organization. Okay, and how and where and it does all this varies based on student, based on location. At the end of the day, these are kind of the 5 guts of the literacy process that we support and work with. So what kind of things does it do for reading? First and foremost, text to speech. It's going to read content out loud to students. Next up, dictionary. We've got just a general dictionary built into our tool, as well as a picture dictionary as well. Not super useful for actually defining words for a lot of our students, but for some English language learners, as well as for some of our kind of application activities, there's some creative ways that we can actually capitalize on use. We'll talk more about that next week. Audio maker, the ability to turn content that's printed into some type of an audio form, like an MP3 for a student to interact with. Our screenshot reader, our kind of pinch hitting, on the fly optical character recognition tool for reading. We have a single word translator built in. We have a way to screen mask or kind of color overlay, have a color over the top of the screen, which might help a student who might have visual disability, might have some trouble with concussions, traumatic brain injury, migraines, or just increased amount of screen time right now in regards to the increase in computer usage for things like COVID. And then also our Simplify tool, being able to, on a website, change, adjust what a web page looks like for students. And we have a question from Karma. Karma asks, is there a limit to how much text it can convert to audio? Karma, it depends a little bit on what version we're using. I can get you specific amounts and numbers when this is done, and/or we'll talk more about that in next week's session in regards to how the audio creation portion works, okay? All right, for scanning support, we have a scan tool. Essentially what that does is it allows for optical character recognition of our PDF documents. So if a faculty or a student comes across a PDF document that is an imaged PDF, we have an OCR scanner built into our tool that allows students to be able to make it readable by our tool. I also mentioned that screenshot reader a minute ago, kind of that pinch hit. Some people also consider that one of our scanning tools as well. For writing support, we have a grammar spell checker built in, dictation, Text to speech, well, it was on the reading side. One of the things I would always work with my students on when I was working in higher ed was having students read their papers out loud and listen to them using that text to speech tool. And we'll talk more about strategies around that in week 3 when we talk about writing. Word prediction, not used a ton in higher education, but some students do benefit from word prediction. Again, we'll talk more about this in week 3. Similar word checker, so kind of those there, your, to, things like that you might see. And then also voice notes, being able to leave voice notes around assignments, leaving notes for yourself instead of typing them out, etc. Kind of a bunch of different applicability around that. All right. For researching, studying, organization, we've got highlighters, annotations, collect highlights and annotations. So students can interact with these electronic documents, mark them up, interact with them, do some more of that high level thinking about our readings, more of that comprehension as opposed to just passive reading, and then being able to pull those pieces elsewhere to be able to learn, to understand, to interact with them. Learning and studying vocabulary words, discover. So if a student has more questions and wants to explore more, there's easy ways to do that. There's some web search features, and then the research folder tool, which is available just on the Mac desktop. Again, much of these studying, researching, and organization features we're going to talk about and break down the next 2 weeks of summer camp. So I just wanted to make sure that we kind of knew what the toolbar did overall before we kind of got into some more of the nitty-gritty pieces of it. But don't worry, we've got lots of applications next week for how these tools work, as well as writing on week 3. All right, and then Deborah, before we move on, is there speech to text as a writing tool? Deborah, yes, there is. That's the dictation tool, so students are able to speak and it will type out. We're gonna show more of that in week 3 of summer camp, but it is built into some of the platforms of our tool. So stay tuned for week 3 for more information on that. All right, let's talk about where the tool works. I met with a school a little bit ago today, and it was kind of an interesting conversation. It was almost more of a, where does our tool not work in some ways, especially when it comes to higher education and where students are doing work. Our tool comes on several different platforms or places that it works. First and foremost, if you've been a customer of ours for a long time or a long time user, you're probably most used to seeing our toolbar on the Windows desktop or on the Mac desktop of your computer. A handful of years ago, we began development with Google and now also have a toolbar that works within Google Chrome as well, which is a really seamless integration if you're a Google Chrome school, and more recently, if you're an Office 365 tool. We're going to break this down a little bit more later on today and then actually show it in action over the next couple weeks. But know that in higher ed, most of our usage is within Windows, Mac on the desktop for Windows and Mac desktop, but then also within Google Chrome as well. More recently, we've had a Microsoft Edge version of kind of the extension come out. We'll talk more about this later. But we also have kind of a version of it for iPad and Android. Now, the versions for iPad and Android are not the full toolbar. It's not an individual app per se on kind of your screen to be able to open up. Instead, it's a toolbar that helps students with writing on the iPad or the Android device. We don't see a lot of usage in higher ed. Most students are going to be using the Windows, Mac, or Google version, maybe some Edge. iPad, Android, not as much. As a result, over the course of our next 7 weeks together, I'm going to focus mostly on the Windows, Mac, and Google version, just so that you're kind of used to that, because that's what students are mostly using. When you're working with students, when they're coming into your office, that's what you're going to likely be working in, and that's why we're going to focus on that. I can't necessarily, because of time shake, show you the same features in all three platforms for everything we show, but know that there's going to be global similarities between it. The buttons look the same, how it works. It's just a matter of going into that platform of choice or that platform that the student is using and doing the exact same processes overall. There's slight variations because of the way that Windows has their kind of Microsoft, their desktop has, versus how Apple has their operating system versus Google. But globally, the majority of our tools are going to work the exact same. So know that what I show you, just kind of follow those same steps over the next few weeks, and you'll be just fine kind of going between the different versions. So some things to note about our tool. When you sign on, it's an annual subscription to our tool, which is something that not everyone fully understands. So I always like to make sure we're on the same page. You'll have access for an entire year for our tool, whether you're buying just a few licenses for students or you're buying for your entire college campus, for example, college or university campus. You'll have access to it for a whole year. It includes all these platforms, and that's a myth that I always like to debunk with schools. Some people think, well, it's only available on Windows or it's only available on Chrome. Not true. You have access to every single one of the platforms on the left side of the screen: Windows, Mac, Google, iPad, Android, Edge, with a year subscription. All places, all platforms, all the places it works with on a computer. And then you're going to get that continual development that I talked about that we're going to kind of focus more on in kind of our second half today. All right, we have someone with another question. Within our campus, how do you know the number of students who are downloading and using Read&Write? Also, could we know what platform they are using? Khalil, that's a great question. I'm going to make a note to talk more about that later today. We're going to talk about something called our data desk. I can talk about usage there and what you can get from the data desk. I'm just going to write a note on my sheet so I don't forget. So hang tight. That'll be a good one towards the end of today. And then we had someone else. Is there a free trial available? Absolutely. If you head to our website, just texthelp.com, there's an availability for you to get a free 30-day trial of Read&Write. All right, so let's break this down. If you're a Google school or an Office 365 Microsoft school, and that's typically what we see in higher education, you're kind of one of two camps: Google, Microsoft. If you're a Google school, you're typically going to see students using the desktop version of Read&Write either on a Windows or a Mac computer, or on the web, Chrome for Google, the Read&Write for Chrome version, or a small subset on iPad and Android. In my last year of working in higher education, I think I had one student who utilized that version of the tool. So not that many, and that's why we're not going to focus on it, okay? If you're an Office 365 school, you're going to see similar usage around the desktop, Read&Write for Windows and Mac. On the web, you have access to Chrome and also the Edge browser. Now, this is one of the other big myths I like to debunk. Up until a few months ago, Office 365 schools, overwhelmingly, I heard from them, we can't get access to the Chrome version. There's not a way for us to get access. We're an Office 365 school. And that's not actually true. You can. And we're going to walk through how to get access. So if your school is an Office 365 school, but your students are using Google Chrome and they want to use the Google Chrome browser version, they absolutely can. So know that you have access to that version of it. And then again, that very small subset of use on a tablet with iPad and Android. All right, let's talk about applications that Read&Write works within. What I've got on screen here is a picture of our toolbar, Read&Write for Google Chrome. And while this focus is just, the picture on Google Chrome, there is application for our toolbars in a bunch of different places that higher ed students are working. And we're going to kind of break that down today a little bit moving forward about where it works. Okay, so I've got things like Safari and Chrome and Adobe and Canvas icons on the screen, a whole bunch of them. So let's talk about where the tool works. One of the things I value a lot about our tool is that it really does meet students where they're at. And this is something I've seen grow a lot over the last few years within our company. Places like on the desktop of a computer, a Mac and Windows, those are kind of the backbone of the tool. I've been using this tool for 9 years as a user before I came on board. It's going to work in a lot of those places on the desktop that a student works. Things like Microsoft Office, for example. It's going to allow students and have interaction with that so that they can um, create documents, read documents in that format, etc. It's going to work in places like Google Chrome, Edge, Safari, so those online web browsers and reading text on those pages. Within Office 365, if you're an Office 365 campus, we have a toolbar that integrates seamlessly within that online version of the tool as well. If your students are Chromebook users, that Google Chrome version of our tool is going to work for them. A big one right now, those learning management systems. We work in a variety of those. Our tool kind of just lays on top of them and all those features can be used. Again, we're going to talk more about this and actually show it in action next week. Websites, I know I mentioned Google Chrome, Edge, Safari, they can read websites, they can interact with text on websites. And then many of those common document type, file types that students are using on a daily, weekly, monthly basis as a student, they're gonna be able to meet. Like I said, I have trouble kind of coming up with places where our tool doesn't work. I'm sure there might be one or two out there, but we're constantly developing, constantly increasing where we can work. We recognize that students are working in a variety of different places right now, especially, and we want to make sure our tool works where students are working. What about Respondus Lockdown Browser from Brad? Hey, Brad, we're going to talk a little bit more about this next week, but we are working on Respondus integration with Read&Write. So more to come on that. Know it's in the works. Know I'll have information in the next couple weeks to share with everyone, but it's coming. Just hang tight, okay? I was waiting for when a question like that was gonna happen around Read&Write and Respondus for sure. All right, seeing no other questions, I'm going to hop to our next slide. Let's talk about these document types, these common document types that students typically are using that our tool works with. First and foremost, PDFs. I know that this is a lot of what disability resource, accessibility resource offices are working on right now when it comes to our tool. Our tool is being used as a way for students to read these documents as a text-to-speech tool. Our tool works with PDFs. It works with PDFs on the desktop of a computer. It works within Google. It works if those documents live within OneDrive Online. It works in a bunch of different places. Next up, EPUBs, and I'm sure that there's internally some collective groans if you're sitting at home watching this webinar training right now, or if you're with a group of people, you're all probably looking at each other as well. EPUBs have been both wonderful and also can be kind of a pain point for higher education disability accessibility resource staff right now. Our tool does read EPUBs. We had a brand new EPUB reader come out within the last few months, so know that we're providing support for students as well around that file type. General documents, things like Word documents, Office 365 documents, Google, just docs in general. Our tool interacts and reads with that. Those learning management systems, which I keep coming back to and keep talking about, we do work within most of those learning management systems, both for reading content and also for content creation in those places. Websites, again, individual research, group research, faculty sending students to websites to read information. It's going to allow for that. And then one of the ones that isn't get mentioned a bunch, but does work is AccuPlacer. I know a lot of community colleges out there talk about that. Do you work with AccuPlacer? We do, and we're pulling together some information on how this works. So we'll have better guides for you all before fall starts is our goal, so that you guys kind of have a step-by-step process for how that works. And then similar to like what Brad mentioned with Respondus is how do we read with Respondus, Lockdown Browser, some of those other browsers out there if you're not necessarily a Respondus campus, but you might be an Examity, for example. Know that we're looking into all that and should have some more information in the coming weeks, and for sure by the time school starts. Some common applications that our tool works in: Microsoft Office, Google Suite or G Suite, Docs, Sheets, Slides. Office 365 within the Google Chrome browser, within the Microsoft Edge browser. Again, all these places our toolbar will work, and you'll see it in action as you explore, as you start working with students. All right, I'm going to double check the questions, make sure that there's no questions on kind of where it works. I know this might be a little bit like drinking out of a fire hose today. I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but I just want to make sure, like I said, we have kind of a basis of where and how it works as we go through the next 7 weeks together. All right, not seeing any questions. Let's talk about installing the tool. And I know that this is something that I hear a lot about, both from when I worked in higher ed, but also as I'm on this side of the table too. If you are ever installing the tool, the most updated version of our installer is going to be on the Text Help website. And I'll actually show you this in just a minute. This is going to get you the desktop version of our tool. It's also going to lead you to kind of our guts of our extension needed for the Chrome version, okay? I'll walk you through what that looks like in just a minute with the extensions, because I know that's something that can be a pain point for some higher education folks. Since all of the move to online, remote, distance learning, whatever kind of term your campus is using, we have actually rolled out a new series of take-home install guide videos for students to really follow along step by step, to be able to walk them through the process of how do I install this, what do I need to do. So if you can't be there with a student, you have a resource to be able to fall back on. So let's hop out. Let me show you what some of these tools looks like first and foremost, okay? On our Text Help website, what you can do is you can actually go to either our Read and Write website directly or just our general website. You can always come over here to the products area, choose Read, Write, or any of our other suite of tools. Scroll down to the For Education area. And then when the website loads, this big pink Try Read Right Now Today is going to give you either that free 30-day access like you asked about, or it's going to give you the newest installer for you to be able to have students download to their computer. When you click on that button, it's going to ask what your platform is. Simply click on that platform and it will either lead you to the installer or start downloading the installer to your computer. For things like the extension, within the slide deck that I've shared with you, there's a great support article that we updated recently that talks about the extensions that are required if you're gonna have students use the version that works within Chrome. So is it gonna work within this Chrome browser that I have open right now on my screen? If you ever have questions about what you need for that, this article is a really great place to start, and it talks you through kind of what to do, what it means, etc. So this is one that I refer a lot of people to when they have questions. And then the last resource on that sheet was the YouTube videos and the install guides. Within our YouTube channel, which we'll talk more about in a little bit when we talk about resources, what we have created is an actual playlist that just walks you through how to install our tools. How do students do this from afar? So if a student wants Read Write for Google Chrome, how do you do that? Read Write for Windows, how does a student download that? And they can literally walk through step by step, pause the video, go to the website and download it. Then when they get that done, follow the next few seconds of the video and do that. So what makes it really easy for you as disability resource, accessibility resource professionals, even just kind of rolling this out across your campus to give students a place to come so they know how to install it without you having to do it for them, or kind of be sitting side by side with them to make sure that this is done accurately and correctly for them to use the tool effectively. Okay, before we move on, I'm going to pop out and trouble check our questions. Chandra, can you discuss the interaction of Read and Write with Lockdown Browser? Is it feasible now? With Lockdown Browser, Chandra, we'd have to maybe try it a little bit depending upon what you're trying to do. And I think this conversation is going to be more feasible for us to have next week when we do talk about reading a little bit more. Okay. And then Chris asked, we have a subscription. How do we get just the install option, not try for free option? So Chris, if you have the subscription, what you're going to do is you're going to want to sign in with the correct email addresses that go with your account. So when I talk a little bit more about that in a minute with signing in, literally that's where we're going with this conversation. I'll answer that question. So give me just a minute to hop to that question. So I mentioned these extensions for the Chrome version. The desktop version is pretty straightforward. You have this installer, you download it to the computer, it opens up and kind of a way to go. For the extension, you kind of have to do a couple extensions to get all the different features of the toolbar to work. And so this slide that I've got in front of you provides links to all of them. And I'll kind of open it up in a second and show you. But there's 3 different extensions in one app that really give you the smoothest experience with the tool. And then I've also got a support article down here at the bottom that I'll show you as well. But the 4 kind of tools, if you're going to use the Chrome version, first and foremost is the Read&Write for Google extension. It looks like this, and it's going to get you kind of that purple puzzle piece that if you're using the tool, you're used to at the top. Okay. Next up is going to be the Text Help PDF reader. Okay, and there's a little difference between these two, so hang with me. The PDF reader extension, again, up here you can see it. This is just going to help us read PDFs. So if you've got PDFs online within Google Drive, for example, Office 365, etc., it's just going to help with that process. And then kind of an ancillary, like a sidekick to that, is going to be our PDF Reader app as well. Apps versus extensions. It's just going to kind of help make sure that everything runs smoothly is the biggest thing. If you're interested and we have time at the end, I can talk a little bit more extensions versus apps, but just know that having both of these is going to give you a more flawless experience. And then last up is the screenshot reader extension. This is kind of that pinch hitting on the fly OCR tool that's going to read content out loud. Not all students want it or need it, but if you're ever wanting to use that tool, they'll want to install the screenshot reader app or extension, I should say, not the app, the screenshot reader extension, the PDF app, the PDF extension, and then kind of the master read-write extension. Okay. Now, if you ever have questions, we do have, again, another support article. We'll talk about where you find all these in a couple minutes. That does break down all of the extensions that are required for the tool and does give you some support as to where to go, what to do, how it works, etc. Again, this article is linked in the slide deck. So if you keep the slide deck, you ever have questions, you could literally just click on the live link and it will send you here so that you've got all of the information in front of you to kind of walk you through this process. All right, I'm going to hop back in my slide deck and I notice that there might be a question or a comment. Let me open it up. Does the PDF reader work in OneDrive and or SharePoint? Shannon, the PDF reader does work in OneDrive. SharePoint I haven't tried because I don't have access to a SharePoint. We're going to talk more about what that looks like in OneDrive next week. Best bet is I'd be happy to chat with you at some point to see if it works, how it works in SharePoint. And then Brad just had a comment of, I love the screenshot reader. Brad, I love the screenshot reader too. It's a great tool. We are going to talk about more about the screenshot reader next week and just how applicable it is for students as well. All right, let's talk about Office 365 schools in Google Chrome. And I mentioned this before a couple minutes ago, but I just want to hit this point home. Microsoft and Office 365 schools, you do indeed have access to Read and Write for Google Chrome. Even though you're an Office 365 school, you can have the toolbar on Read and Write for Google Chrome. You have web browser access, you have LMS access on there, you have G Suite application access, docs, sheets, forms, slides, all the places. You have access. And how you get access is that when you sign into Google Read and Write for Google Chrome the first time, there's actually a sign-in option for Microsoft or Office 365 schools. And I've actually got a screenshot for you that I can actually show you in a second what that looks like. One of the things at the bottom of the slide that I just threw in there, I wasn't really sure where to put it, is that if you're a Google school, there is the ability to do campus-wide deployment of our tool extensions. Sometimes if you're struggling with that extension installation process at all, if you're a Google school, one thing that you can do is work with your IT for kind of system-wide deployment. If you're looking for more information, feel free to reach out to me or your rep and we can walk you through that. But just know that if you are a Google school, there's some ease based on being a G Suite administrator to be able to do that. Not so much for Office 365, but no, as a Google, you can. So let's talk about that initial login with Read&Write. When you sign in with Read&Write for the first time, I realize the screenshot's a little blurry, blown up as much as it is on the screen, and I apologize for that. But what you can do is when you sign in for the first time, when you download the extension to your computer, click on the extension for the first time, this is the screen you're going to get. It's going to ask you, do you want to sign in with Google or do you want to sign in with Microsoft? And this is where you as a Microsoft school have the ability to sign in and have that Google access. When you sign in to the tool, you're going to have students sign in with whatever your domain sort of email is. So for me, for example, at texthelp.ed, texthelp.com is the domain of our company. It's the kind of @ symbol behind our emails. It's part of our web address. When I sign into our tool, I'm going to use my email because it's connected to that domain. And that's the same for your students or any user on your campus. They're just going to sign in with that domain email and it pings off of our server. It recognizes, hey, they've got that correct end part of their email address, and it gives them access to the tool. So it doesn't matter, again, within Read&Write for Google Chrome, are you a Microsoft school, are you a Google school, you're going to have access to the tool regardless in Google Chrome. Now, if, for example, your student signs into the tool and they're using it and it's for some reason, it's not identifying as an Office 365 school, it's saying it's a Google email or a different email, students can always go into the options area of the toolbar, wherever that options area is, clicking on accounts down at the bottom. And what should happen is you'll get an option to sign in with Microsoft. Or if you're signed in with Microsoft, you'll have the option to sign in with Google, for example. This button here will actually switch for the user based on what you're logged in with. TextHelp is a Google-based company, so that's why I get this sign in with Microsoft. If we were a Microsoft school or a Microsoft company, it would say sign in with Google. So know that if for some reason you can't get it to switch from the initial login for whatever reason, or you try to change it here, you can always go into the master options area of the toolbar to flip it and switch it to. We'll talk more about kind of the settings and options in just a second. One of the other pieces to note for signing in with Read&Write for Mac is when you sign in the first time with this tool on the desktop version, you'll typically get this question from Microsoft that talks about requiring assistive devices to be enabled. Essentially, what this is doing is saying, hey, we want to be able to do some stuff on your computer. We want to be able to use the voices. We want to be able to, be able to read content out loud. And so having students follow this security and privacy step is going to allow our tool to be used on the Mac desktop. A lot of students I've worked with in the past have kind of bypassed this step and wondered why it isn't working. This is why. So if you work with students with onboarding, make sure that they do go in, follow these steps of clicking on security, checking the checkbox so that it does indeed get you the correct permissions, essentially, so that the tool can be used correctly. All right, before we go to settings and options, I am going to double check our questions just to make sure. Seeing no questions, I'm going to keep plugging along. Let's talk about the settings and options. Within all of our toolbars, we do have the ability to do things like customize our settings and our options. We can do things like adjust the speech, adjust the features and toolbar customization, essentially how it looks on our screen, the language that we're using to read content out loud. what our screen masking looks like, having those color overlays. Do we want it yellow? Do we want it blue? Do we want it gray? Highlighters. What do our highlighters look like? Again, signing in with Microsoft or Google like I just showed you. And then also some features around vocabulary list. These settings and options change a little bit based on if you're using the Google version, the Microsoft Windows version, the Apple Mac version, for example. But know that the big kind of gut features of our tool will always be in all of our options areas. Speech, for example, language, for example. Those ones will kind of be everywhere. When I worked with students, one of the ones that I always made sure to show them or made sure that they went in and adjusted was settings around speech. This is going to give students the most user-friendly way of content consumption. We want to make sure that the speech settings work for the student. If they don't work for the student, they're more likely to abandon use of the tool or not use the tool moving forward. So this is something that I really made sure that I worked with students on. First and foremost, the rate, making sure that the rate of speech works for that student. It's not too fast or it's not too slow. One of the things I would always talk to students about too was some subjects you might be able to speed the content up, while other subjects you might have to slow it down. And there's nothing wrong with that. We have done studies with our tool, and over time, long-term use, not one or two times, students can actually increase the rate of their speech settings so that they can read faster the longer they use the tool. Next up is the voice. There are a variety of different voices built into our tools, and for some of them, there's actually additional tools that can be downloaded as well. But finding a tool voice that works for students is really important, again, for that ease of reading function, for example. We never want students to enjoy the voice 100% because it makes it really easy for them to doze off, to lose focus, to kind of be lulled by that voice. So if you ever get pushback from students saying that the voice isn't superhuman-like for some reason, and our voices are pretty good. I typically was able to have conversations with students around that saying, we don't want insert your favorite celebrity who has the most soothing voice here and have them read to you because you'll just kind of be lulled to sleep then or just kind of lose focus in your reading. We want it to be just a little bit not perfect for you because it's going to keep you engaged. It's going to keep you kind of on your toes. And I've had students that I've worked with on that who have said, yeah, Rachel, actually that makes sense. And they've tried it and they've come back and said, I'm really glad that I didn't have someone who was, 100% human sounding, for example. I don't want you to think that our voices are robotic sounding in any way. They're pretty human-like, but there is no substitution for a human reader yet that we've seen. Next up is continuous reading or read by. This is how much at a time our tool is going to read. Are we going to read a sentence at a time and then stop? Are we going to read a paragraph of our reading at a time and then stop? Or are we just going to read paragraph after paragraph after paragraph? This is something that can be really useful, especially for students who have attention or focus issues. Having the ability to change this and adjust it for them kind of forces them to stop and think about what they read so that they don't get 3 pages in and go, I don't remember anything that I've read today. Some of our versions of our tool have the ability to change pitch, so how high or low, as well as the word pause, how much space is in between words. And then also in some of our speech settings, there's the ability to actually change the pronunciation of a word as well. So if our tool for some reason is not pronouncing a word correctly, especially as we get into maybe higher level science, maybe medical terms, there's a way for us to actually go in and adjust what it sounds like, how it's pronounced, etc. Within a Windows computer, that options, the Windows desktop is going to be on the far right side of your toolbar typically, and we call it kind of the hamburger menu. It's the 3 lines. You got your bun on top, your bun on bottom, and the patty in the middle. You're going to click on that. You're going to get some basic features here listed, being able to toggle things on and off like continuous reading, read the web. Show more settings is where you're going to get the bulk of your read and write settings. So over on the side here, you can see all of the different areas where features are listed that you can adjust. The one I have open right now is our speech voice settings, for example. So know that this is where you're going to go to adjust those settings. On a Mac, it's going to be that settings wheel. Looks kind of like a gear. I've got it circled here in red. And then again, we've got speech open right here. This is one that I would make sure students were aware of, adjusted. On a Mac computer, to edit the voice settings, most students are going to need to click on this edit voice settings, and it's going to send you to kind of the master voices of the computer. And that's where they're able to adjust the speed, what voice it is, and download additional voices as well. Macs typically only come with about half a dozen preset voices. There are tons more that they can download. It takes a couple minutes for each voice, but know that there's options there for them. And then within Google, it's going to be that, again, 3 dots over on the side here, again over on the right side, but this time it's the ellipse, the 3 dots. You're going to choose that gear options. And then again, the first option up at the top is going to be speech. Now, one of the questions I get asked quite a bit is, what about additional voices? I don't love the voices that are pre-built in. And for Windows and Mac, there are additional voices that you can download and have access to. And within the slide deck here, I've got a link to the document that you can call on. And I will actually hop out of our slide deck and show it to you. Let me pull it up. Here it is on the screen. You should be able to see it. Over on the far left side, Read and Write for Windows. It's got all of these options that you can download. And then Read Write for Mac, it talks you through what's available based on operating system and the voices available. So when I talked about all those extra Mac features, they're all right here for students to download. Okay. Again, this resource is linked within the slide deck. It's also sort of on our resource page, which we'll talk about in just a minute as well. Before we go to updates and feedback, let me triple check our questions. I'm not seeing any, so let's dive right into updates and feedback. I mentioned a little bit at the beginning that our software is constantly updated and is in constant development. We really look at what education needs, what changes are going on, and we take your feedback into account when we develop and update our tools. We do these short little sprints for our updates. So every 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, there'll be some type of an update that typically comes out from us. You may or may not actually see it come out. You may not be prompted for an update even. Some of them can go on in the background of our tool depending upon the version. But know again that if you're a subscriber to our tool on that yearly basis, you'll have access to all of our updates, even again if you don't see them roll out. Sometimes they're automatic in the background. Once in a while, you'll be prompted to update them by a little kind of icon in the bottom. It'll pop up of your desktop of your computer and say, hey, there's an update. Can you, click me to update the tool? So know that with our subscription, you're getting access to all of that. This past March, when everyone was sort of in the process of beginning to move online for learning, remote, distance learning, we had kind of an agenda in our heads for the next few months of what we wanted to do as a company for development of our tool. We put that whole plan on pause, took a step back and said, what is it that we need to provide to education? What is education needing from us? We looked at it, we changed our roadmap, and as a result, we built additional features that were going to help students as they did that remote learning, that distance learning, that online education. So we're a pretty agile company in that way, where we're listening to you, we're watching the market and figuring out what it is that schools, colleges, universities, and students need. Our company is really big on feedback. You guys drive what it is we need to do, education, what you guys tell us, and in all of the toolbars of our software within the options area, there is a way to get at our online feedback form. And I'll show it to you in a second. But basically, it allows you to submit your honest feedback of what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see, And what it allows you to do is really help drive our innovation, what you need from us. So I encourage you to, whenever you have thoughts, comments, send your feedback to the feedback form. It does go directly to our developers, so it doesn't just get lost kind of in outer space somewhere. It does indeed go to them. They do look at it, and if they ever reach kind of a critical mass of what it is that we need from them, or we see that you guys need an education, we'll look at what it would take for us to add that, to change that, to put it on our roadmap, etc. One of the other ways is you can also reach out to your rep too. So if you have comments, things like that, feel free to do that as well. Online form is a really great streamlined way to do it, but know your rep is there to support you too. And as I said, the feedback is considered by both our development team, our product managers, and we do really want to hear from you. We want to hear what you have to say. So within our Google version, if you click on, again, that little ellipse, the three periods, right below options, we've got the send feedback option here. Within Read&Write for Windows, we've got this tell us what you think option, as well as within the Mac toolbar as well. There's a way to get at it. In our online form, essentially this is where it leads you. It's just a Google form for you to fill out. Please give us your feedback and let us know, are you an educator? Are you a student? Are you a workplace user? And it is anonymous, so feel free to share anonymously and share honestly what's going on. If it is ever anything around tech support, for example, this is not the place to go. We do actually have tech support available to you, so just know that if you're looking for tech support, this isn't the place. This is, hey, I want to see this feature, or wouldn't it be great if we could do this with the tool, for example. All right, let me hop back into our slide deck, and then I'm going to double check our questions. Looks like no questions. So, oh, someone just snuck one in. During this boot camp, will you be showing Equatio as well? Deborah, yes. Equatio, I think, is week 5 of our boot camp. So know that we'll be talking about that and how it works with Read&Write. Good question. All right, so let's talk about free resources that are provided to you as a customer, or even if, not totally a customer. I have a peer colleague in the field who used to say, if I work in education, free is for me. Know that we have a bunch of different supports built into our programs, free with a subscription. Okay. First and foremost, we have an educational blog, which I'm going to talk about and show you a minute. We have a certification program, which gets you up to speed and is able to tell people, hey, you know what? I know what I'm doing with this Read&Write tool. We've got videos available on our YouTube channel. We've got tech support that's available to you, our website, as well as a tool called Tool Matcher, which helps us, or I should say helps you all figure out kind of what tools might be beneficial to a student based on what kind of the impacts of disability are. And we're going to break down the big ones for education, for higher education, in just a second, but know that all of this comes free to you. All of it comes with your subscription. The only thing that doesn't come is if you're looking for training, some type of higher level training that comes in a larger chunk, maybe making sure that your entire campus is up to speed on things and wanting that really kind of specific PD for your college or university, but everything else comes free. So let's talk about the 4 kind of big resources that I like to make sure that you guys know about. First and foremost is our training portal, and I'll actually hop out of the slide deck in a minute and show you what it all is. But first and foremost is our training portal. This is where you're going to find kind of these online courses, the certification where you can say, I'm a Read&Write level 1 user, but then also resources as well. What are some resources that we have pulled together for higher education? These are documents, these are links to some videos, user guides, what is this tool for, how is it used, etc. Next up is our YouTube channel. Short videos with different features, past recordings of webinars. We have playlists on there with kind of compiled videos like those installer guides. that's constantly in development and another really great place for you to get information. Our educational blog, I think, is one of our most underutilized resources that I encourage you to actually subscribe to. Again, all of these are live links, so click on them and I'll send you there. But what happens is periodically throughout a year, every couple weeks, we've got a series of blogs that comes out. And they're on a variety of different topics, but we've got one that focuses mostly on education. It'll talk about updates that come out. We typically do one around the beginning of the school year with what's happened over the summer. I recently wrote one just kind of recapping where our tool works, especially now with all of the online learning going on. It's a great way to stay up to date. And if you subscribe, you get alerted when there's a new topic that gets posted. So you can choose whether or not you read that one. As someone who sat on the other side of the table for 9 years, this was a great way for me to stay up to date on things that came out, new features, new product releases, updates. Where does the tool work? Where does it not? So I highly encourage you to subscribe. It was how I stayed up to date with information. And then also our tech support website. As I mentioned, tech support is free for all of you as users. This is our training portal. It's just training.texthelp.com. It's going to have things like I mentioned, courses, certifications, resources. Go in, explore. It's worth a few minutes of poking around. Next up, our YouTube website. Again, it's live linked, but we've got it broken down by different playlists based on topic area. We've got a student, the take home, if we want to learn about the PDF reader, if you want to watch your Digital Math Mondays, for example. Again, a great resource to have bookmarked. The blog, like I mentioned, there's an ability to scribe right here up at the top. And then again, it breaks down different topic areas and actual different categories too to help you kind of siphon through and find what you might be looking for. And then last up is our tech support as well. We've got a great tech support team who are here and ready to help you out. There are 2 more resources I want to mention too. There's support articles. You can get support articles just by scrolling down the TextHelp support page just a little bit to view our support website. When you click on that, it's actually going to allow you to search for articles. You can boil it down based on product, and then it'll get you some of those support articles that I've mentioned. And 2 that I've included in your slide deck is what does my Read and Write subscription include, which is something we've talked about a little bit today, but then also how do you get started with Read Write for Google Chrome, for example. And I know that that's one that a lot of people could use some extra support on. So I've linked both of those, but it does break down all the different places that our tool works and how it works, for example. And then again, that getting started guide. What do I do if I'm just starting out? And while some of you might be kind of pro users at this point, might not be as useful, but know that we've got plenty of support articles there for you. DataDesk. DataDesk is our usage analytic tool for both Google users and also Office 365. This came out just very recently. The website is datadesk.texthelp.com. Again, I've got it live linked here. And what you're able to do as a user is see the type of events, the number of, based on number of days. So if you want to look within like a 30-day time period, and sort of the best way to look at it is over time. So what did we do last year in the month of February versus this month in the month of February, for example? You can boil down sometimes to some more kind of student-based areas, depending upon how you have things set up. And I've included a DataDesk admin analytics kind of support article here. So if you're wanting to dive in more on how this works, it's there for you. I know there was a question in regards to how do we know what version has been downloaded, things like that. We're not able to boil down the number of Windows or Mac download installs, but you can if you have students using that Google version or using the Office 365 version online, able to kind of track and follow that. If you're wanting more kind of answers about this, let me know. Reach out to me or your rep and we can follow up with you. This is kind of a view of what the dashboard looks like, so that you know kind of what you're getting into. I have schools say this is super useful to know how useful the tool is, for example. Seeing new questions, I'm going to wrap up here in our last minute and a half or so. Let's talk about practical strategies, next steps, what's ahead of us. Over the next week, if you have a couple minutes, which I encourage you to try to find any way you can, if for some reason you haven't installed the tool in all the different domain areas, all those different platforms, do it. If you can have access over your computer, make sure you have the desktop, the Google, maybe even the Edge version. Is it updated? Have you logged into all of the platforms? Next up, I encourage you to go in and customize your settings on all those platforms. Check in, do I like this voice? Do I not like this voice? And then one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is look at your calendar for each of the weeks that we're getting together this summer. Carve out like a half hour, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour. Put it on your calendar so you have dedicated time so that when we do have these follow-ups, if I do say, go out and try this, hey, we have some quote unquote little homework, you have time dedicated to actually put this into action. One of the things I always hear from people when I do trainings is, Rachel, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do the follow-up. It's been too many weeks since training for me to remember what's going on. Make that time now. Dedicate that time to yourself. It's exactly 2 on the button, 30 more seconds. Reading and study strategies. Where the tool reads, tools that support reading, study tools that are on the toolbar. Most importantly, though, we're going to have tons of practical examples. Getting this down to just an hour is going to be challenging for me because there's so many great applications for higher education students out there. Again, as always, it's going to be recorded. I'll make sure you get copies of it. That being said, I've answered questions as we go. I'm not seeing any in the chat. I'll hang around for another minute or two in case you do have questions. Like I said, reach out to me, reach out to your rep if you have questions. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Have a great 4th of July, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.